What's going on, everybody? This is the From Screen to Shelf podcast, episode 2. My name is Will. I'm here with Gabe and Chase. This is the podcast where we talk about physical media, entertainment, everything in between, from the silver screen to the palm of your hand. But before we get started here, before I pass it on to my colleagues, I want to speak on behalf of all of us for everybody, or two, I should say, everybody that listened to our last episode and provided us with feedback. We love you guys so much. Our expectations have been shattered. And I think I speak for Gabe and Chase when I say that this is beyond what we ever expected this to turn into, even for episode 1. And we're super excited. We're super motivated to keep going and providing you guys with great discussions. But we really appreciate each and every single one of you who listened to the first episode. It means so much to us, from family, friends, everybody that we shared it with, especially our Discord community, our 4K physical media community. You guys mean so much to us. And with that, we're gonna get started here. But before we get going, actually, I got something in from somebody here. I don't know who sent it. I don't know if you guys can see. It just says "play me." So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to make of this, to be honest. But
You might want to be
I guess
careful with
we'll.
that.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, guys. To be completely honest, it's just there's some kind of like this thing's really grody. I'm gonna have to wash my hands after this. But I guess we'll fire it up and just see what they have to say. If you guys are cool with that, I don't know.
Yeah,
Should we do it?
see, man.
Let's hear.
Let's see what they say.
All right, let's do it. All right.
I want to play a game. Day after day, you sit here and talk about meaningless subject matter, boring everyone with your shitty opinions on new releases and the latest 4K transfers. It's about
Opinions
time
aren't
you
shitty.
spoke about something much greater and discovered your true purpose. I'm offering you the chance to do just that. You'll find that the doors to this room have been sealed shut from the outside. You must discuss in great detail and convince your listeners why the Saw franchise is the peak of American movie making. You have 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete this task. If you succeed, the doors will open. However, you'll notice the monitors placed in front of you. If you fail, you'll be forced to sit here and watch The Nun 2 on repeat for the rest of your days.
God.
Only then will you truly know the
Guys.
meaning of suffering. But enough talk. It's time to
I
start.
don't think I can do
Oh
this.
no!
Yeah,
I
hide
can't do
that.
this,
Guys, I think I'd rather
Can't
like
do this.
chop off my leg than watch The Nun 2. So
The Nun 2.
I'm gonna die, guys. I can't do it.
All right, we
No.
we got to think. I mean, Chase, you're more of an expert on the Saw franchise than I am. How do we get out of this?
I think
What do we
in
do?
this instance, whenever it comes to life or death or watching The Nun 2, I think we just have to take the punishment and embrace the fate that's being handed to us by John Kramer himself at this point.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think we got this though.
Okay.
I think
Well,
at
guess we
least
know
on
what
my
we're
end, I
talking
think
about,
we
right?
can. Yeah, we can talk about how Saw has impacted the horror community and how it's maybe the peak of horror cinema. I know some people may disagree with that, but at least on my end, it's been a super important franchise on my end. Like I think it's something I grew up with, and I think it's also it's something, at least for me, like growing up, like it was cool having like my generation's serial killer, so to speak. I think I was talking with you guys about this earlier, where you had the '80s where you had Freddy Krueger, you got Mike Myers, you got Jason, and then kind of growing up in the early 2000s, we really didn't have anything, at least that I can recall. So when Saw came out, I think it was new, it was fresh, and it was like finally like, okay, we got this demented, sick dude that can be considered what I like our generation's serial killer. So at least on my end, I can talk about at length how Saw is peak horror cinema. So I'm confident I can get out of this trap. I don't know about you guys, but what do you guys think about Saw in general in terms of its release and its legacy and how it's impacted horror?
Yeah,
Chase, you wanna go ahead?
yeah. I mean, I've got quite the unique perspective, which I know we've kind of been waiting to be. I've said it before with how Saw has personally impacted me. It started my love and kind of not really hate for horror, but it kept me away from it for a long time because I had quite the unique experience. I got a hold of the original Saw not too long, around I want to say I was around 9-10 years old when I first watched Saw 1. So whenever I watched Saw 1, that movie terrified me and shook me to my core. That movie kept me up for 3, maybe 4 days. I couldn't sleep. Every movement I did was an anticipation of Jigsaw coming after me. I would look under my bed. Even a trip to the bathroom became a Black Ops mission, and I had to go full-on military style in fear of my life. And you want to know how I tried to remedy that? Of course, I watched Saw 2. What else would I do? I wouldn't avoid Saw, right? You would think I would, but I tried to drown it out with more Saw, and that made it worse. That made it way worse. So it kept me away from horror forever. I was terrified of anything that was even remotely horror. And it's why it has a special place in my heart. And it, just like you said, Gabe, it's amongst my favorite franchises for sure. Top 3 easily. Friday the 13th has a special place because it never scared me in place of Saw because I love hockey. So Saw shook me to the core. And even whenever I was like 14 or 15 and watched Saw 3, it was a rinse and repeat cycle. There's just something about Jigsaw for some reason, and I know that's pretty unique. Very few, if nobody, I've met personally has been shooken to the core like that from Saw, and nothing has even gotten close outside of Sinister. Sinister got the closest for me personally to actually making me feel that same level of fear from a movie. But that's how Saw personally impacted me, and that's why it has a special place in my heart.
What was it that? Oh, go ahead, Will.
No, I was just going to say, I love that your remedy was like, oh, I'm just going to keep watching them. And maybe they'll get more family friendly as the franchise goes on, and I'll be less scared. But
desensitize yourself.
That. Yeah,
but what was so? Because I think Will and I were talking about this earlier. Like a lot of people aren't necessarily like scared from Saw. You know what I mean? A lot of people are grossed out by it because of the gore. But like, what was so scary about it that like kept you like looking over your shoulder?
So I think what it was, I remember the particular scene. It's the barbed wire scene in Saw 1, or like the thin wire where the guy's got to go through it. I think it's the
Jeff.
editing.
I think it was Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was the editing, like the constant like a shock aspect, the shaky cam, or like the jump transitions and the staticky effect, in combination with his voice and the pig squeal, and then the laugh. It wasn't necessarily like I'm not afraid of clowns. I thought it was that for the longest time, but I don't think it's necessarily clowns. I'm still trying to figure out what it is. Every Saw 1 rewatch, I'm trying to go back to 10-year-old Chase and really deep dive and really go through a little bit of a session and try to figure out what shook me so bad. But I do remember the part, because I was in bed watching it. I just took my dad's Blu-ray and put it in my my player, and I don't think he knew I got a hold of it. So whenever I watched it, I remember that being the part where I like took the covers and I was like, slowly putting them over my face and trying to avoid any and all eye contact with him, because it's definitely not John Kramer, but the mask, the Billy puppet, the laugh, all of that, it terrified me. It shook me. It changed me. It made me the man that you see today.
Interesting. It's interesting because like I said, a lot of people get freaked out by the gore, but I mean there are some super scary elements to it. Like when you go back and watch it, like what you said with the editing, at least with the Saw franchise. Like I'm trying to think of other horror franchises that maybe did this, but like the editing where it's like you see like someone trying to get out the trap, and then like you see that kind of that shaky cam footage, or like those quick flashes of like maybe cuts to the skin or whatever. Like the editing was like super unique, and that could have been just because it was so. I think the first one was so low budget. I think it was like $1 million. So I think they were super creative with the budget that they had.
Yeah. That had to be what it was, because like I remember Saw 2, like the aspect of it, and I think really fundamentally what it is like with an innocent mind like that at that time, it's like people do this to each other. I think like getting a hold of that, it's like getting a hold of like kind of how like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Blair Witch kind of shook people around that time. It felt like you were getting a hold of a home video. I think that's how I really processed it. I was like, oh my God, I'm witnessing like the most wild crimes in America at this point. So that's really, really what shook me fundamentally to my core for sure. Like that really was. I know that aspect for sure. But yeah, the camera angles, everything like that. Like I just really consider that, like you were saying, like the utmost peak of American cinema, up there with like Texas Chainsaw and then, you know, some other ones that have been done. And yeah, I consider it to be one of the greatest horror movies of all time for sure. Personally, it's because of how it impacted me as well.
Yeah, for sure. I know like there's a lot of love for the first one, and then kind of after that, everyone's opinions kind of differ. What about you, Will? What about like with the Saw franchise? How is it kind of how have you perceived it over time?
I mean, the first one's definitely memorable for me, and after watching it again, you know, before talking about it today on the podcast, I think I definitely appreciate it more. I didn't see it right in 2004. I think 2005 or 2006 was when I first saw it, and at that time, or by that time, I should say, the second movie had been close to release. Either it had already been in theaters or just about to be. And I watched the first movie, and there was a game that I played at the time. I'm going to shameless plug here for Condemned Criminal Origins. I don't know if you guys ever remember that game. It was for the Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember playing that game at the time, and then it was around the same time I discovered Saw, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, because it was, you know, this whole concept of these two guys obviously trapped in a room, having no recollection of how they got there, at least at first. And at the same time, there's these, you know, crazy murders, these wild, like, murders involving, you know, people caught in traps that are being investigated. It just had that kind of vibe, like very grimy, like just dirty, but at the same time, like just sinister vibe to it. And I think it's also important that we touch on what was going on with cinema, or at least with horror at the time. I mean, this was like the mid 2000s. At that point, we had gone through the period of the 90s where horror kind of took a backseat to other genres. There wasn't really anything in the 90s until Scream that really resonated with audiences, at least on a mainstream scale, right? And so, you know, by the time Saw was released, it's something that audiences weren't exposed to for some time. You know, the whole, you know, the torture porn, or gorno, as they used to say. I think that's another, you know, word that people use to describe movies like it. Hostel was another one of those movies. Yeah. But for a while, you know, horror was kind of focused on, you know, obviously after Scream, we had a lot of, you know, imitations, you know, the whole, you know, teen slasher genre of the late 90s, I should say, with, you know, I Know What You Did Last Summers and Urban Legends and those kind of movies. And then going into the early 2000s, we got a lot of the J-horror remakes, you know, like The Ring and movies of that ilk, so to speak. So when 2004 came around and movies like Saw and Hostel came out, it was something that people had not been exposed to in some time. And I think that's why it was so impactful, because it was something new. And to touch on what Chase had mentioned briefly, Jigsaw was the first. He was the first icon that we had been exposed to, I'd say, on a large scale since Ghostface, that had lasting cultural impact, right, throughout the horror genre and movies in general. You know, something that was instantly recognizable, that was marketable, and obviously stuff like that people get attached to. People associate that with horror. So Saw kind of became, at least for me and a lot of my friends at the time, the face of the horror genre, right? And then obviously Hostel came out, I think, a year or two later. I think 2005, I want to say. Yeah. So I had discovered it around that time, and yeah, it definitely impacted me. I don't know how we want to move forward in our discussion, but yeah, the ending definitely stuck with me.
Yeah, I want to touch on the ending for sure.
The ending's fantastic, dude, and I'll go out on a whim and say this. I don't know if how many people will agree with me, but I think in a world where let's say there was never a sequel to the first film, I think that film would have achieved cult status,
for
right?
Sure.
Because the ending was so perfect. It ended on such a raw, like, bleak note. And I love that shit. Like, I eat that shit up. You know, it reminded me a lot of, you know, later on when I got into a lot of Korean cinema, especially like Korean horror. They take that same approach. You know, there's not always a happy ending. And it's so bleak and sinister. And that's what I think I love about the first movie, but also the fact that you get to hang out with these characters, you know, Dr. Gordon and Adam in the room, and you get to know who they really are, you know, and it takes its time to kind of develop that and build on that. And that's something that the subsequent movies, they still do that. They still pay a lot of attention to character development over the course of the franchise, especially with lore, more so. But that first film, again, it just feels much more intimate, you know, and I think that's why it works so well for me, even after, you know, rewatching it. It's like, wow, this was really good, you know? There's some lines of dialogue I will say that kind of gave me a chuckle. I think Adam's character, like here, I was watching
Oh,
it with my
God.
girl,
Yeah.
and it's the scene where he's like, "Oh, this is the most fun I've had without lubrication." There's some
Yeah.
like head turners in there. I'm like, "What?" Like, so some of the dialogue's a little off for me, but other than that, I think the structure, the story, the editing, it's super well done. And just what I was into at the time, like playing Condemned, that game scared the hell out of me, and Saw was like right in that genre of, or it just had that vibe to me, and I
think it's-
associated that with that kind of just that kind of grittiness and like there was almost like a true crime aesthetic to it.
Yeah,
with-
it's like a
with the
noir
way-
kind of atmosphere to it.
Exactly. And like you guys mentioned the flashback scene, or in this case, the razor wire, right, with one of the
Yeah.
previous victims. It had that vibe to it, and I love that. I love that they did that with the editing, and obviously we see that in the later films as well. But yeah, I think more so just the impactfulness of Jigsaw as an icon. It was something that people had not been exposed to in some time with the
Mhm.
whole gore, torture porn aesthetic, and that was shocking at the time to a lot of people. So,
Yeah. And I
it was
also kind
something
of like
new.
what you said with the story and the character development. At least for me, like not only was we had our own kind of like serial killer for our generation, so to speak, but I loved it so much because of the character development and the plot. Because like I mean, horror movies they're such a spectrum, right? Like you have the campy ones, you have the ones you just watch just to see gore and people die and all that. But this one kind of had this slow burn where you get to know these characters, and then the ending, which to me I'm not ashamed to say it's one of my favorite endings in cinema, period. Like when I saw him getting up from the bathroom, my jaw fucking hit the floor. I was like, what the fuck? And I love showing that ending to like friends or people who haven't seen it. Like I'll seriously sit down and watch Saw with them, and like just take a peek while I'm showing them the movie, and then when they see John Kramer get up, they're like what the fuck? They're just like flabbergasted. It's a genius ending, and I think and it kind of they take that approach with the other films, like you said. Well, maybe it kind of like loses some traction a little bit, but they do focus on character, and I think that draws me a lot personally. And also just the twist. I love the twist at the end of each movie. Now, like after the third one, I think they it was kind of hit and miss, but at least with the first three, the twist always kind of impressed me on my end. I always love the twist and how it just kind of ends and just cuts to black, and you're like kind of left wanting more. But I think it was something people hadn't seen. You have a horror movie that like really cares about character development. You have, and then like also the uniqueness of John Kramer as well, because I mean, obviously he's like a bad dude, but he's like punishing like these pretty shitty people. Like it's not kind of like your regular horror movie where you want everyone to survive. It's like a part of you is also kind of like, yeah, that person's a piece of shit. Like I can kind of get why he's in that trap, but it's kind of, it gives you this kind of like gray area in terms of morality. Like, do these people deserve it? Obviously not, but you can kind of understand from his perspective why he's putting these people in these traps. So
he has a code, right?
Exactly.
He lives by or and acts by a specific set of rules, which obviously is touched on in the movies countless times. But and that's what's great about it, is that he's for the most part consistent with that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't veer off the deep end where it's like, okay, suddenly he's going to start doing this, but it's very much cut and dry. He has a very specific goal. There's a lot of psychology behind it, which I think, I mean, at least I saw it with my girl. She appreciated that aspect of it. She's not big on gore. And like I'm cool with gore. I like gore. I like practical effects and all that. That's right up my alley. But that only works if you have good stories and good characters to build upon, right? And to establish that first, it makes it that much more effective. But yeah, to piggyback on what you said, it's like at the time at least, it was a thinking man's horror movie,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember it being dismissed like, oh, it's another one of these. It's just a lot of gore, and it's like, no, it's more than that. It really is a very intimate, like well-told, story-driven horror movie, which was at the time, like I said, very refreshing. I don't remember what else was even out in 2004 and 2005 that I can think of off the top of my head.
A bunch of bad remakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, with the J
Bad
horror
word.
remakes and all that, and the early 2000s, like they would just remake everything except the cast gets like younger and prettier, and it's just like I think people were starting to get tired of that, especially coming off of like the boom that Scream had created.
Yeah.
People were just looking for something different, and it was a combination of a really well thought out story, a fantastic character, obviously, that to this day has lasting impact, but also probably a little bit of audience fatigue, given what what movies were being released, you know, in the years preceding Saw. So
Yeah, and also just a shout out because that guy who plays Adam, I think his name's Lee Winnell. He was actually the
right.
screenwriter for the first three. So he did a fantastic job. And also, you had mentioned the marketing. Will, I think they did a genius thing with the marketing because I remember it was like the mantra was like, if it's Halloween, it must be Saw. It was like every year there was a new Saw movie, and it was just like, you know, just a well-oiled machine at that point. But when it was at its peak, I was like, you know, you'd be excited for the next Saw movie. You're like, shit, it's coming. It's October, and obviously, like the quality kind of started going up and down, but I liked that whole mantra where it was like every Halloween you had a new Saw movie, whereas other franchises you'd have to wait a few years between installments.
Yeah. And I want to pose this question to you guys. I'm assuming all of us have the physical 4K release, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming we rewatched it. That's the version we rewatched. I wanted to shout out that Atmos mix on there. That Atmos mix on that is just absolutely stunning. The sound system, or the sound staging, I'm sorry, the way that it sounds, and just the way that every single minute detail gets staged in that Atmos track with the 7.1. The way that they are able to keep the same, kind of reminds me of the transfer from Second Sight for Texas Chainsaw, where they kept the grungy aesthetic while cleaning it up a little bit where it needed to be, in moments where it made sense without losing the true core value of it. Because just to go full circle to everything we have been talking about and encompassing that itself, that's one of the most charming aspects of that, is it was filmed so low budget, and it sells itself a lot better, actually, not even a little bit, a lot better in that aspect. It doesn't necessarily come off documentary-esque, but it does a little bit, you know? I really appreciate that 4K release and the way that the sound is done, the amount of love that was given to that, to the script, to the acting. Everybody was just so stoked to be aboard of that, or on board on that. And yeah, it's just, it has its status for a reason, and it's an annual rewatch for me. I watch it every single year. Sometimes I might watch 3 because 3 is my personal favorite because of how different it is. Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say
it's because, spoiler alert, give it a few seconds to marinate on that one. So for Saw 3,
spoilers.
I like how it's all about mental. It's very little physical, and it's all about mentally torturing this guy. Making him get over a death in the family and stuff like that. Because at first I'm like, golly, why would you punish this guy for this? But then you kind of find out more and more details. And the way that it all came full circle, that's one of the reasons I appreciate that Saw 1 through 3 the most, even though I love some of the later ones, is it jumps back and forth so much and pays homage to that. There's so much minor detail in the first one that sets up the following 10 films, and even with what we're going to get into with Saw X here shortly, that even sets it up to still make material today, because there's so much jam-packed in that runtime, and it just makes it for such a special viewing. It really does, and you can really take away new things. Personally, me, each time I rewatch that, I just want Adam to die faster and faster every single time. I just really don't like his... he's well done, but he plays that character that it's I want you to die fast and get off screen. Yeah.
I want to shout that Atmos track out for the first film, because it was so well done. Dude, it's mostly dialogue driven, as you guys know, the film, but there's just the small, atmospheric sounds that they brought out so much, the pipe squeaking, the glass and metal clanking in the bathroom and all that. It was so well done, you know. And I remember watching it before, you watch it on a standard format, a DVD or whatever, and it's the people, especially the screams, it sounds like they're in a tin can or something.
Yeah.
They're very compressed. They really brought that out. Even the gunshots, I remember when they're on the pursuit, and they're chasing John through the halls, just the steam and the pipes, all that. They brought that all out. It's just so much more immersive. And again, I don't want to make this sound similar to what we talked about with The Exorcist, but it's a testament to what they're doing with these Atmos tracks. They really make watching these movies again so much more of a heightened experience, after so many years. So yeah, shout out to everybody that worked on the sound mixing, because unbelievable work. Probably, I'd say out of everything I've seen this year, it's probably in the top 5. I mean, Exorcist is there as well, but I'd say Saw for sure. And the second one I don't have on on a physical copy. So we watched that on streaming. But yeah, one stood out to me for that reason.
And some of it's because of like what I think both of you mentioned is just the budget, right? When you have a budget like that, you really have to like squeeze it, and you really have to nitpick and focus on like how can I get this sound effect that's gonna and make it impactful, right? So like I think that when you have a budget like that, it almost like makes you like even more focused on delivering a better experience, like at least with the sound. So I think that's what the Atmos track delivered for sure. And I don't know when we're getting the other ones because I know it's just the first ones on 4K, right? They haven't released the other ones.
One Jigsaw is, which I know we all love, right? That's the
Jigsaw.
most loved. That's the most loved entry in the franchise for sure.
Not on
And
my
Spiral.
Yeah, we love it. I mean, this is peak cinema we're discussing here.
Oh wait, yeah, we have to get out of our trap, right? So yeah, we love Jigsaw.
Yeah.
It's peak cinema, yeah. But yeah, I'm hoping they do. And it's interesting with these movies though, because they're shot so gritty. The 4K for the first installment, the sound is obviously like where you're gonna get the most like bang for your buck. Because I mean the way it's shot on a traditional 35 millimeter. It's not. And I don't know what happened with that transfer, but even with the original, like when you see it like with the Blu-ray, it just really shot like really rough. So I don't know how much the 4Ks are really going to deliver outside of maybe like the HDR. But I'm excited. I'll purchase all of them on 4K. I'm excited for them. I'm surprised, honestly, they haven't released Saw 2 this year because I think it would have been a good approach with like how they did the Scream series, just kind of going back and releasing one per year. I think that they should have, with Saw X coming out, they should have been like here's Saw 2, and the next year do Saw 3 and kind of go from there. But we'll see. But I mean, yeah, or deliver it. I'll buy a box set of Saw.
Yeah,
I'd be the first one to probably do it. I don't know about you guys, but it's I think the legacy of Saw, I think obviously it's had a huge impact, and I think we're also at a time too where it's like a new generation getting into it as well. You know what I mean? We saw it like early mid 2005s, and now you have people, maybe like teenagers and people starting college that are getting into Saw and going back and watching the other one. So I don't know what the future for Saw holds, especially after Saw X, but I guess we'll see. Which leads us into Saw X. So we each saw it. I think you guys saw it Thursday night, right?
Oh, I did. I saw it at 9.
Yeah, Friday for me. I saw it. Yeah, I saw it Friday night, 7:30 showing.
Okay. So you guys had some days to marinate on it. Yeah, I saw it yesterday, and it was a pretty decent. It was like half packed theater, so it wasn't too bad. So I'm curious. I know we kind of were like texting each other, and we didn't want to say what we thought because we were like, we want to save this for the podcast. So I'm curious to see what you guys thought of Saw X. So I know, so Chase saw it first. So maybe you've had a little bit more time to marinate on it. So what was your impression of Saw X? And just to let you guys know, we'll maybe just get into first impressions first and then go into spoilers for people who haven't seen it since it just came out this week. So sure. Chase, what are your first impressions of it?
Yeah, I had a pretty 50-50 take on it. I'm still marinating on it. I think it definitely warrants me going and giving it a second viewing. I don't dislike it, but I didn't walk away loving it for sure. I went and saw it at Dolby Cinemas, so I got to see it with an Atmos track and with Dolby Vision, and I really think that helped elevate it to an extent. I don't think it was as great of a use of the 7.1 with what we were talking about with like Saw 1. Even for like a theater setting, there was some really, really cool scenes where, it'd come from left to right, and it really helped heighten the experience for me for sure. That's why I really like going to see them in Dolby Cinemas, because it can really elevate an experience for you. I will say, without spoilers, I did find parts of it absolutely goofy. Like there were just parts where I just kind of laughed a little bit, like I genuinely laughed. And there were just some parts where I thought it was a little bit relentless. And once we get into spoiler territory, I will go full on into that, because that was really my biggest complaint, was how relentless in a non-Saw manner it seemed to come off for me.
So you and I aren't friends anymore, pretty much.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Podcast is done, guys. Pack up and go home.
Guys, we have to help each other get out of this. We can't start turning on each other.
Sure you don't want to change your review, Chase?
It was the greatest thing I've seen since Exorcist a couple of weeks ago. It's peak cinema. It overtook that as the greatest horror movie of all time, guys.
There we go. Will, you saw it yesterday. What were your thoughts and impressions on it?
Yeah, I think Chase and I are kind of in the same boat here. I had the same thoughts. It was like during the screening where, these moments happen and I'm just sitting there in my seat what what the hell is going like why are they doing this? But at the same time there were things that I really enjoyed about it. More so than the latter films. I mean, 1 through 3 for me I'd say are all solid movies. I've seen parts of 4 and 5. And this is probably where I'm not going to survive this game because I haven't seen the more recent films in their entirety. Spiral, Jigsaw. So I'm not as familiar with the lore in regards to the latter releases. But I will say this: I mean, the character development and the moments, more intimate moments that we get in this movie were in some ways refreshing. Um, I understand why they made some of the choices that they made without going into spoiler territory, but overall, yeah, I'm torn on it. I think, and I've said this before, with new movies, I have to see the movie at least twice. The first viewing,
Mhm.
like I've said, I go in with an open mind, and just try to absorb everything in, and whatever reactions I have are the most genuine that they're going to be. And then usually the second viewing is where I go in with a more critical take and I try to pick it apart a little bit more. So I definitely want to see it again. I'm not going to see it in theaters. I'll wait for the physical release. But I'm interested to see how I feel, several months from now, when I watch it again. But yeah, definitely warrants a second watch just because I'm so undecided. And sometimes I walk out of initial viewings and I know exactly how I feel. But yeah, I'm still trying to kind of put my thoughts together on it. But yeah, there's definitely things about this movie that I know people will have a problem with. And I knew that right away. Like, oh, this is gonna,
Mhm.
turn some fans of the franchise off a little bit. So, and we'll talk about that obviously when we go more into spoilers, but that's pretty much where I stand. I'm kind of 50-50 right with
Yeah.
Chase. So,
And I will say I agree with the notion of, especially with Saw. I feel like you definitely need to watch them more than once because like I've never walked out of a Saw movie and been able to give like 100% like where I'd rank it in the series. And especially with the twists and everything, like you would definitely want to watch it again and look out for the clues and kind of sit and marinate with how it kind of impacts you. But I think Saw more than a lot of other franchises, you definitely want to watch it again. And I'm the same with you. Well, I'll probably watch it when the physical release comes out.
mm,
On my end, I think I liked it a lot more than you guys did. I walked out. I actually loved it. But I do see where, and we'll talk about it when we go into spoilers. The tone of this movie is completely different from all the other ones. Like if you're
mhm,
expecting, and this isn't a spoiler with the other ones, if you're expecting kind of, started off with like a trap and, people are in this game and, you don't know what's going on, which is pretty much the theme of all the other ones. You're just kind of thrown into a situation and you kind of learn as the movie progresses. This one's not that at all. This one is like, 30, 40 minutes of like building up a story.
mhm.
And with like, I mean, I would say a good half hour of just like story and character development before you even get into any of the horror stuff. So it's definitely a different tone. And I can definitely see how that might be decisive or divisive with the community. I think that there's going to be people who love this movie and people who hate this movie. But in terms of like the other installments, I'd probably say it's as good as the first three. On my end, I'd need to watch it again. There are some little issues I had with it, some nitpicky stuff. I'm curious to see what Chase says when he says he laughed at a few parts. But yeah, I mean, I loved it, and I went to go see it with my wife. She enjoyed it a lot as well. So I'd give it like a solid 8 out of 10 first viewing. I mean, I want to see it again and see how I feel about it, but I liked the different approach. I think it was time, with a 10th installment to do something different. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect,
Mm.
to deliver to the community. So I liked the risk that they took. I think it paid off on my end, but obviously it's not gonna appeal to all the fans of the Saw franchise. So, do you guys want to get into the spoiler cast right now? Maybe
Yeah.
warning right now for spoilers. So we'll be getting into spoilers right now. So if you have not seen Saw X or Saw 10, I don't know how they want us to pronounce it. I've seen like everyone say Saw X, so I'll call it Saw X. We are going to get into spoilers for Saw X. So we will post maybe in the description. the timestamps as to when you can kind of fast forward to get past the spoilers and continue with the podcast. But Chase, so we're gonna get into spoilers. I know you said there's some parts that you just thought were goofy. What was going on, man?
So it was the beginning. I'm not sure if it because the sequence of events was it was about I say the 10-minute marker with the janitor. Whenever the finger trap.
Yeah.
I would have to say that's the easiest trap to get out of. The guy should have just cranked that to 6, and then he would have walked away and kept his eyeballs. With that being the promotional poster, I think that should have been a lot better executed. And I get it, the whole cross tubing to give you that aspect of, something different. I found that super goofy. Like, snap your fingers back. That's probably the most healable trap that Jigsaw has ever put somebody into. So I just think, like, I was just sitting there kind of laughing. I was one of the only people laughing, and my friends kept looking at me like, giving me the side eye. Like, why is this guy laughing? And I was like, this is the easiest trap I think I've seen Jigsaw put somebody in.
I agree with that.
Yeah, like, guy could have kept his eyeballs by just, and then healed, unless...
But did it happen, though? Like
he got to... Yeah, he got to level 3, but now, to my point, and maybe I missed something in the audio tape, there was 6 dials. So 5 fingers, 6 dials. So maybe, going to 6 might have snapped his wrist, done something a little bit different, but peeping out the trap, that was the goofy part for me. There was a couple of goofy parts. Then whenever I talk about Relentless, before I go into that, because when I start talking Relentless, I'm going to start talking about the bone marrow scene. The one with essentially, I forget what the exact medical term is for it, but the one with the garrote around the leg. So before that, and at first I was kind of like, oh my God, why are we like, I want to focus on Tobin Bell, but like, where are we getting this first 20, 25, 30 minutes? Like, where's he going wrong? Because I did actually watch the trailer for Saw X, because that is one of the few I will watch. Surprise, right? So whenever it comes to that, I really liked the aspect that it was a very spontaneous game. And I didn't like the whole, a lot of people were posting like bloody disgusting articles and stuff like that. Even Damien Leone, who was getting his Terrifier 2 talked about as one of the goriest movies, and people were puking, giving bags. I'm sorry, but what movie did you watch? That was one of the least gory Saws I've seen, and it made sense though. And I kind of touched on that for the story, because it was one of his most spontaneous games he's ever done. He literally just set it up on the spot, after everything that had happened to him and, finding out that he had been lied to, right? So that leads me to kind of the more relentless aspects. That lady was literally a half second away from survival. She survived that game. That actually pissed me off for her life. I was like, she was the closest I've actually probably seen to somebody completing the game. And I get it. You should have made a more spontaneous decision. But literally a half second more, she would have lived. She should have been given a pass, but I get it, And then
same with the other guy too, with and we'll get into it, probably the bone or the brain matter thing, where like he did it and he was waiting for it to dissolve, and you're like, man, this is like, Jigsaw should give you an extra 30 seconds.
Yeah, because you did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
absolutely, man.
Yeah, and that actually is one of my going back to full on goofy. With what the brain thing. Not once while that guy was, jabbing into his own brain did he, you know what I mean? Kind of like creak, like you're picking at your brain, my guy. So,
highly sensitive, points. And he had he was just going,
going at it.
That's what threw me off. I was like, really?
Yeah. And that goes to the goofy aspect, as fun as it was to watch, right? And then to come full circle and wrapping up my end on the spoiler part of it. But one of the more goofy parts was the final trap. That was really, really goofy. But
the
one of my
waterboarding one, or the
that's where I was going to backtrack a little bit before I went on to the goofy ending.
You're talking about the money bag as the ending, right? The money bag trap.
I liked how it was set up. I just thought like, I like the whole pinning two people against each other aspect. That was cool. But the simple fact that you just had to put your head through something and more or less live, I really didn't feel like was an utmost punishment for what she was doing. She should have gotten like those people below her got way more harsh punishment than what she full on deserved a lot more. The one lady had to full on garrote her leg off, you know what I mean, and suck the bone marrow out. of her leg. One dude just did open brain surgery on himself with no anesthetic, no nothing, no numbing cream, and took it like a champ. And all she has to do is survive poison gas. And that was goofy. Yeah. The child aspect, that actually was like, oh my God. Semi-spoilers for Evil Dead Rise coming here. We've all seen Evil Dead Rise, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That took me aback in Evil Dead Rise because it had a child's death in that movie, and I thought we were getting super close to that in Saw. So that actually had me the most tense I had been in a Saw movie for quite a while. Because I was like, oh, come on, man. Come on, dude. Make it. But, he's able to help Kramer out and stuff like that. And I think that was seeing one of the most human sides of Kramer, ultimately still the game performing the way that he wanted it to go, because as it backtracked on and had a lot of aspects where it was like, this was meant to happen, not necessarily the same exact way, but it made sense. The twist with the guy, though, I was able to predict. That was the only other thing, like him being the husband, that made sense. You put the phone call together, somebody was going to show up with what she said. You know what I mean? So with him showing up, and he was one of the patients, I was able to, this guy, as soon as he's let go, he's going to switch sides. But that's pretty much it. And that's why, like, I didn't give a score whenever we were kind of touching on it. I'm sitting between a 6 and an 8 because, like, I appreciate goofiness and I appreciate relentlessness. And it was different, like you said. And I like how it's not just, hey, here's another Saw movie, right? Because I just freshly rewatched Jigsaw and Spiral, and those tried to be so different and similar at the same time. And this one took something while being grounded to its roots and giving us what a lot of people want. Because Tobin Bell, he's counting his days. He's healthy, and I'm so thankful for that. But it's a matter of time until we no longer have Tobin Bell have the ability to make these movies. So the aspect where there was no pig masks for him, and he was in, I want to say, damn near every single scene. I can't really recall many scenes that he wasn't in. Maybe less than 10 minutes of the movie. So if I was happy in that aspect that we got a full-on non-Jigsaw still, but John Kramer movie. And that's pretty much what I have to say about that.
Yeah. No, I agree with a lot of those critiques, actually. They just didn't, and we'll get into, I want to see what Will thought about it. It just didn't, I had the same critiques, but I guess it just didn't have an impact. Like, I was like more forgiving in the sense where I felt like watching it, where I was like, this is so different to me that I'm like, okay, because I agree with you 100% with that lady. Like, she was, excuse my language, she was such a bitch. She was probably she's such a bitch, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, she should have like had the worst trap, and then like where you just leave her there.
Yep.
And yeah, so I agree with that 100%. But I feel like a lot of the nitpicking I had with this movie was just kind of overshadowed by the tone and like the story approach, where I'm like, okay, I can kind of forgive these like little goofy things. But Will, I saw you nodding your head with some of what Chase was saying. Did you have a lot of a similar experience?
I'd say most of what Chase said, yeah, and I don't really have much to add. I mean, yeah, the poster, the advertising, the marketing, I was really hoping that there was going to be a bigger buildup to that trap. And again, I mean, yeah, you can consider this nitpicking at this point, right? I just wanted more out of that. I felt that, like Shay said, it's just too much. He could have gotten out of that easily.
Yeah.
Right? And it just, they kind of rushed it. Like, they went right into it. And I wanted more out of that, for something that you put on a poster, like, cause people see that, like me, and go, oh, okay, shit, that's gotta be one of the big, probably one of the biggest traps or the highlights of the film. Right. Exactly. So, yeah, I was a little let down by that, and especially the ending. I wanted that doctor to really fucking get what she deserved, because she was just such a ruthless individual, just a horrible fucking person, and like she got off fucking easy. Okay? She got off fucking easy, and I was just kind of shaking my head, like, that's it. Like, it's like, okay, just keep your head here, and yeah, she's gonna die there because there's no other way to get out of it, but. I just felt like the people that died before her, like Gabriella, I believe her name was, and Mateo, their deaths, their tests were so much more brutal.
Yeah, and actually, can I piggyback off that, Will? Because you just reminded me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Gabriella should have been able to walk. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, that's the other thing.
Yeah, I like how Amanda really correlated and was like trying, like, you're lucky you aren't getting what he's getting because this was supposed to be for you. So I wanted to piggyback off that because, like, I think she got the most brutal for having the most innocent play out of anybody in there, for sure.
Yeah.
and there's that
Amanda
whole
also
dialogue.
empathized with her. Like, oh,
Yeah.
my bad, Will, but yeah, just the whole
No,
empathy
you're right.
between Amanda with her experience as a drug addict, like,
Yeah.
and Gabriella's experience as a drug addict.
Yeah, and that's like, and the audience kind of relates to that too, because like you want to forgive her more so, just like we forgave Amanda, once we figured out what was going on, I should say, with her backstory, right? And Kramer makes the argument, well, she had free will at the end of the day, she still could have chose to not get involved, but like with drug addiction, those situations they're not cut and dry like everything else, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to choose to murder this person for their money or something like that, whereas people that are involved with drugs, it's not always black and white like a
Yeah.
lot of other crimes, so to speak, right? It's much more of a gray area with that kind of subject. And so, I definitely appreciated the fact that they had that moment with Amanda. You kind of see that humanity, which is obviously one of the high points, I think, of this movie, right? Like, I have a lot of issues with certain aspects of it, but I'm kind of with you, Gabe. Like, I am willing to forgive a lot of that, because at the same time, like, I really appreciated the fact that they took time to show us the vulnerable side of things, right?
Yeah.
And that's not something you even really get a lot in horror in general. So it's just something refreshing, and it's like you said, after so many films, I think 11 films now, if I'm not mistaken. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, what other direction are you going to go in? You got to try to veer off the beaten path a little bit and creatively come up with something new, but at the same time maintain, the characteristics and the vibe, and motifs and everything about the franchise that people really love, and why these movies have become, so impactful. You want to maintain that. You want to maintain the core of what makes a Saw movie a Saw movie. But at the same time, introduce some new themes, introduce the film to a new audience, I should say. Because yeah, I mean, we were just talking about the amount of time that's passed. I mean, Saw was 2004. Since the first incarnation of this franchise, we're looking at 16, 17 years, right? More so. So yeah, actually, yeah, 23, not 23, excuse me.
19
Yeah,
years.
19 years.
2023, yeah.
19 years. But yeah, I'm willing to forgive a lot of that stuff, because the character development and the vulnerability that we saw John expressing as a character was very refreshing to me. So I really admired the story and the character development. But yeah, the traps just kind of fell short for me. Like, the way that they were structured, I feel like that last scene, like, they had the potential to really build up to that and make that something that you could walk out of theater going, holy shit, like, that was fucking crazy, and there's a part of me that feels like that's too much to ask, but at the same time, yeah, I feel like they could have made that doctor's death much more memorable, instead of just it kind of felt like a letdown to me. It felt like a bit of a cop out. I get why they did it, but it's like, okay, she's just going to stay in this room, and all she has to do is just not breathe in the gas, and she's fine. And that's it. She really didn't get to experience pain or suffering and really question her morality in the way that the other characters had the opportunity to do with their traps, right? Like, it just didn't really work for me. The ending, that is. But yeah, overall, I'd say if I had to rank it, if I had to give it a number out of 10, I'd probably give this like a 7, which is pretty solid. Like, if I had to rate it now, like, I'm going to watch it again. And I look forward to that, because I'll be able to really break it down a lot more. But yeah, I mean, I'd say 7 is probably, I'm comfortable giving it a 7 out of 10. Overall.
Yeah. And before I go into my thoughts with it, because I heard you both talk about the trap with the promotional poster with the eyeballs. My impression was that didn't happen, right? Like, he was just picturing it. Like, the guy was like stealing, and he was like picturing mentally like what he would do to that person. Because then the guy puts the stuff away, and then he's like, good choice.
Yeah.
So I don't
so
think
that
that.
whole,
That's why I kind of forgave that one, and I at least because I'm a pretty, I would say I'm leaning towards being a Saw fanatic. I love the Saw movies. Like, most of the times when these movies come out, like, they have some weird contraption and trap, like, on the teaser posters, and then a lot of times you don't even see it in the movies. I know like Saw 6, there's this weird one where it was like this like V-shaped thing and you're like, what the hell is that? And it didn't even pop up in the film. So like for me, at least when I saw the poster, I was like, that looks dope. But I was kind of, I don't know. I was like hesitant. Is that even going to show up in the movie? But I agree with you guys in the sense that I actually everything that you guys said, like a lot of the traps some people actually pass their traps, like the girl with the leg, like she should
have given a
pass the
pass.
trap. Yeah, the dude with the brain matter, like he technically passed. He put his fucking brain matter in the damn thing, and he, it's just maybe another 15 seconds and he would have been okay. He actually did what he was supposed to do. So that did kind of, I was joking with my wife when we were watching it. I was like, I said Jigsaw needs to add like another 30 seconds to his
overtime
timer,
counter.
he doesn't explain it. Yeah, he doesn't explain like, hey, by the way, it's going to take like 20 seconds for the shit to go through.
Yeah.
So there's that. The doctor lady definitely didn't get her due diligence. And then also just the thing that my biggest critique was, John Kramer actually falling for the scam, like for me at least, because like for someone who is so meticulous, who's so thoughtful, who's so thinks of every single possible angle, I'm like, dude, like you really fell for that shit. But at the same time, like I think that's why they kind of garner towards his humanity with his cancer and like his desperation just to overcome it. And I think that's what saved it. But that was a nitpick I had, where it's like, dude, like this is kind of like fishy and you're going for it. So that kind of took me out. But I think the biggest thing for me was just, I'm a sucker for it. It's the character development in the story. And like a lot of the intimate moments with John at the beginning, like the first 30, 40 minutes, which I think a lot of Saw fans are going to love or hate. I loved those scenes. I think that they were fucking outstanding. The scenes with him and Amanda, kind of talking about, his legacy and her, passing the baton to her, and, kind of what you mentioned, Will, the stuff with Gabriella, the drug addict. I loved all that stuff. Anything with John Kramer where you can kind of get into like his vulnerability, his psychology, him as a character, I'm all for it. That's why I actually Saw 4. It wasn't as good as the original trilogy, but you got a lot of his backstory with, the death of his kid and his wife, and you had a lot of like flashback scenes that kind of really got you in the mind of John Kramer, and I feel like they did the same thing with this one. So I think that a lot of the shortcomings that you guys mentioned, I agree with, but I was just able to kind of forgive a lot of them just because I loved the actual plot and I loved the actual like character development with like John at that point, even to where like, where he's quote unquote healed and you see him kind of drawing in the book and then he kind of like rips the page out and throws it away. It's like, do I really want to do this anymore? Was I right? Like you had that quick moment where he was kind of questioning what he was doing. And then obviously that all goes downhill when he figures out what happens. But I loved it. And I honestly, my favorite part of the whole movie was the part at the end with the little boy. I know you guys had mentioned it, but I fucking love that scene just because you got a good glimpse of how complicated of a character he is, that he can, kill these people. So, I mean, he doesn't say that he kills people, but he does. Like, he kills people so despairingly, but, he was willing to sacrifice himself for that boy. You know what I mean? Like, the whole don't pull scene. I thought that was awesome. And I thought it was awesome, too, because from my understanding, I think Amanda, like, the way he had planned it, Amanda was supposed to be in that boy's spot. And then the boy was kind of like this variable he didn't account for. And having John Kramer in one of his own traps, you'd never seen that before. And I thought that was like so fucking creative and so unique. So I think that they did so much that was so different, that was effective for me, that's why I was able to walk out and say, I love this movie. The guy who directed this one, I don't know if you guys know, Kevin Gruert. I can't pronounce his last name. I always screw it up. He was the editor, I believe, Saw 2 and forward, and he directed Saw 6 and Saw 7. And Saw 7's like my least favorite entry in the whole series. But Saw 6 I loved, like that was another peak one for me. So he's been involved in the franchise for a good portion of his career. So I personally think he kind of hit it out of the park with this one. I'd probably put it with the first 3. I need to watch it again though. But I was satisfied kind of walking out the theater. I thought this was like way better than I thought it would be, because honestly, the trailer I was kind of iffy on. It looked kind of just generic revenge torture kind of stuff, but the plot really elevated it for me. So I give it a solid 8 out of 10. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I think that last trap definitely, at least the one that John is stuck in with the little boy, that speaks to that whole invulnerability that he's willing to undergo, a lot of uncomfortable situations in order to dedicate himself to his craft, so to speak. Let's use that word for lack of a better way to put it. But yeah, that's something new. That there were things that, like I said, they did that were new creative directions for them. But again, they kept it within that mold of what makes Saw, which I loved. Because they found a way to reinvent it and kind of subvert expectations, like with Kramer in the Trap. That's a perfect example of that. But yeah, and also just to show his human side. I mean, I did not expect those scenes, like with the boy, like when he's helping him fix the bike, and all those like intimate moments. I honestly I didn't expect any of that going into this at all.
Really brought out a
but
different human.
What's that?
It really brought out like a different human aspect of him.
Yeah, which is, I'm okay with that, and I think you said it, Gabe. That's definitely going to divide a lot of people. But coming from me, I mean, I haven't followed all the latter films after 3 and 4 as closely as other people have, so I'm not as invested in or I should say, I'm not as invested or attached to this supposed idea of how Jigsaw is supposed to be or how John Kramer's supposed to act, right? So I'm going to be much more open to that kind of stuff, which I was. So, but I can definitely see certain segments of the fan base, having some issues with that as far as how much vulnerability they showed. So
I think it just boils down to your perception of what John Kramer is. You know what I mean? Like, to me, he's always been, and this is going to sound weird because he's, tortured, God knows how many people, but he's almost like an anti-villain in a way, right? Where like it's hard saying he's a good dude because he's so fucking twisted, but like he is a good, he cares about people. Like, with that boy, like he cares about decent people who do the right thing, and everyone that he puts in these traps are just kind of, people who have gone astray in their life or just have done horrible things. So like he isn't like a bad person in a way, and that's why like it's always drawn me to the whole John Kramer psychology thing. It's like it's a total gray area that you can debate. Obviously, no one should be tortured to death for any mistake that you make, but I think that's what makes him such an interesting character, and I think that's what they kind of really amplified with this one was, bringing out his humanity, kind of showing like, hey, he's not 100% a sick, twisted dude. Like he does care about people. He wants to help people, but he just does it about in the most vindictive and atrocious way possible.
I think that's like, that also, I think it correlates with like a very primal like part of us that we have, where it's like, we've encountered people in our lives that like just do really shitty things, whether it's to us or to other people. And I just think that's part of Jigsaw, or in this case, John's ability as a character to resonate with audiences. Because, you all have, or we've all met those people, like I said, in our lives that we just fucking can't stand, right? Like whether it's like how they treat us, or as I said, we witness something horrible happen to somebody. And in some cases, like those people get away with it, right? Like they don't get reprimanded, or you don't see justice for those situations. So I can see why he as a character resonates with a lot of people, because they can kind of take out those frustrations that we internalize by just going to see these movies. And it's like, okay, these are people that do horrible things, and they really got me with the whole setup of like the fake care center, and that they were doing these fake operations on people, and I think the line is actually, I think it's spoken in the movie, that's like the one thing that they took away from people was their hope, the only hope that they had left for a better life, in the situation they were in with cancer or a terminal illness. And so that's something that I think it touched me in a way, because it's like, damn, like it's obviously sensitive subject matter for a lot of people. But I think going back to what I said, with being able to relate to somebody like him, he's the person that people can get behind, because it's like, okay, yeah, he's giving those people their due diligence, right? He's giving them what many people believe that they deserve. So that's one of the fun things about the Saw movies, I think, is that you can go and enjoy that kind of stuff without having those thoughts yourself. Because obviously it's like, well, yeah, we can't obviously torture people like that. It's not right. But it's an outlet for that kind of frustration that I think a lot of people have internalized due to I should say due to experiences that they've had over the course of their lives. So.
Well, we've even like exemplified that a little bit, just talking about the one doctor lady, just how atrocious she was. Like we all wanted her like to, you know what I mean? We wanted to see a horrible death for her, and
It's a
I think
testament to the writing of her character though, because they really sell her like I fucking hated her.
yeah, she's a piece
I
of
just
crap.
and I think that's why the ending was such a letdown for me, because I was like, I
Yeah.
really wanted that to be like such a payoff, and for me it kind of fell short, obviously. But yeah,
I had
agree.
a buddy who used the analogy where he sees kind of Jigsaw as almost like what you said, the whole primal thing. Like it's almost like John Wick. You know, you see the dog die, and it's like, okay, you want John to kill every single fucking person involved with that. And Jigsaw's kind of the same way, where it's like, you know, that these people are they're pieces of shit. You want to see them suffer, and it's just the same thing, just kind of in a horror kind of horror-esque atmosphere, so to speak.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask you guys this. How do you guys feel like it sits between Saw 1 and 2?
I don't feel like you need to watch Saw 1 and 2 at all, really. And that's something that you mentioned to me, Chase, because I had asked you that. I said, well, the way I watched them was actually ideal, I guess, according to some people, because I watched 1, and then I saw X, and then I watched 2 again, and then 3 yesterday. So, yeah, but honestly, I mean, there's obviously things that are thrown in there that are references to the other films, and you'll catch that if you're paying attention. But I think approaching it from more of a casual moviegoer perspective, in my case anyway, because I'm not as invested in Saw as a lot of other people, I didn't think that it makes or breaks this movie. You do not need to see 1 and 2 or really any of the other films to appreciate this movie. So yeah. I don't think it had too much of an impact.
I think what I'll say though is like, I mean, we've been talking about it a lot, like the relationship between Kramer and Amanda. Outside of Amanda being a constant, Saw 1 with the bear trap mask, and then Saw 2, her being a participant in the game, and then her being like the big twist for the most part, right? I think a viewing experience of Saw 1, like for somebody that's new, let's say somebody, you know, hopefully if you've never seen Saw and you're listening this far in, you should turn it off and, you know, go watch it. But I definitely think it would make for a good viewing experience for somebody as a first time watch. Saw 1, X, and then 2. Outside of the production value might be a little bit jarring for the difference in times, right? But just getting that extra level of really anything from them is like, it's just Amanda and John Kramer are just two of the biggest staples in the first 3, right? They're the biggest draw. People always talk about them, you know, Amanda, John Kramer, they're the biggest draw for that aspect. So getting a more human side, or human as you can get for serial killers, right? It makes for a pleasant experience. But even if you did just go straight up as they came out, because of course I haven't rewatched Saw X yet again, but I saw 1, X, 2, and then I rewatched all of them up to Spiral. And I mean, it can really fit in anywhere that you really deem fit to watch it, as long as you understand that it's set between 1 and 2. It still makes for a pleasant experience, so I don't think you necessarily have to watch them in that order, but I definitely think it would elevate the characteristics of the characters a little bit more, versus having 7 episodes or movies that go by without necessarily having, like Amanda, like John, of course, is in most of them past 3, right? Even with what happens, like, you know, flashback scenes and stuff like that, but Amanda's in it way less. So having her back, even in the most minor role, or even in this instance, a major role, is just awesome for a Saw fanatic like, you know, Gabe and I are. We're going to watch them every year that they come out. They come out with them, you know, it's been 20 years the series has been out, so that averages 2 movies a movie every 2 years. So every 2 years, I'm going to go see one.
Yeah.
I also low-key, I have a crush on Shawnee Smith ever since I saw The Blob as a kid. So she's a babe. I love her.
Yeah.
So, if she's in a Saw movie, I'll see it. I don't care what it is.
Yeah, she's a fantastic actress. I kind of wish they actually did. Like, I mean, like, I know she's not in a lot of movies now, but like, I mean, I think she's a fantastic actress. She did a great job with Amanda, and just kind of like what Chase was talking about. I mean, John Kramer is obviously the foundation for the series, but I think the stuff between, you know, Kramer and Amanda, that's what made the first 3 so appealing, and ultimately leading up to spoiler. I mean, we've been talking about spoilers, but, you know, spoiler for Saw 3, where, you know, the test was actually for Amanda. Like that actually like blew. That's why Saw 3. I can kind of see where Chase is going with it. Like, not only with the whole Jeff is actually the dude from Saw 3, right? That's the dude with the son that died.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that razor wire guy was named Jeff, but Saw 3, like the whole thing with Amanda like being tested by Jigsaw. That's why that was one of the most emotionally impactful twists, where he has his apprentice that he's having to test because she's just turning into. I mean, she's already a serial killer, but I guess you could say she's turning into a traditional serial killer, like where she's actually murdering people, not letting them escape the traps and all that stuff. So the dynamic between the two, I love it. And I think this one, you can honestly, like what Chase said, I think it's amplified if you watch, maybe Saw and then Saw 2 or however order you want to do it, and get that dynamic with Amanda and Kramer. But honestly, for a newcomer that's never seen any of them, if for some reason you're just like hanging out with friends and they're going to see Saw X, if you just jump in, you might kind of just be a little bit confused in terms of the dynamic with Kramer and Amanda. But you could seriously just walk into this movie and watch it just for what it is and have a good time with it. So I think that was another draw for it too, was just that it's you don't need to have all the lore and all the mythos and get into detail about every single movie. You can literally just walk into this one and have a good time with it.
Yeah, and it's a really good one-off, like even for people that are new to the series. Like I think Gabe, you were saying that earlier, that it's really good for a new generation. It's just really, really good barrier of entry, more so than Jigsaw was really trying to be, and more so than Spiral was even trying to be. I definitely think Spiral was the most different out of any of those, like solo, trying to do something a little bit different, because you can tell there's some passion in that, regardless if you love it or hate it. There was some passion for the people that made it, because that was by Darren Lynn Bousman, who I'm pretty sure was one of the original editors on Saw 1, because a lot of these directors have been on most of the Saw movies.
Yeah, so Bousman or Bousman, I don't know how to say his name.
Yeah.
He directed Saw 2, 3. Bousman, yeah, he directed 2, 3, and 4. And then came back for Spiral. And I know a lot of people, that one's another hot take one. I know a lot of people hated Spiral. It's not like amazing, but I had a fun time with it.
Passable.
It's passable. Like, I went in, and it's so weird that Chris Rock is a hardcore Saw fan, apparently.
Yeah.
And wanted to do that movie. Yeah, so Spiral was cool. I like Spiral way more than Jigsaw personally, in terms of if we're talking about ranking of the series. Like Jigsaw to me was just kind of a letdown in terms of just going into more history, and there's another apprentice, and that's where it just you start getting this fatigue where it's like, how many apprentices does this dude have? Like, you had Amanda, you have Detective Hoffman, you have the dude from Jigsaw, and it's like, who else? And then the worst installment, in my opinion, I might get. I don't know what people feel about it. Saw 7, Dr. Gordon twist. Just I was so pissed. I was so pissed when I liked you loved
that.
it. I liked dude, that. I was so mad. It was totally a play to the fans. Like, I remember the forums. I used to be on I don't know if people remember this, the House of Jigsaw forums. So these forums were like super popular when the Saw movies were out, and that's where everyone went on to theorize, what was going to happen on the next installment. And everyone was like, dude, it's Dr. Gordon, it's Dr. Gordon. And like for years I was like, that's the dumbest fucking thing.
It makes sense though to me. Well, two things.
It doesn't make sense to me character wise though, because it's like he was tested. I mean, like he was pissed being in that situation. I'm like, so what changed your mind when you got out of there to where it's like, yeah, let me work with this dude?
Yeah, I think with one thing, because I'm fresh off a rewatch of Jigsaw. Like, I just finished the whole series, except I have like 20 minutes left in Spiral, but I remember it well enough. So, the House of Jigsaw gets a shout out in Jigsaw. I don't know if you remember that, because remember they're talking about forums and websites dedicated to Jigsaw fans?
Yeah.
Hey, that's fresh. I just watched that one this morning, so that made me laugh. I didn't know that was a real thing. So, 2... The only reason it made sense is if it would have made better sense had they planted the seeds a little bit better, more so than those envelopes whenever they flash back to Jill Tuck and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So whenever it comes to the Gordon twist and stuff like that, I've always wondered. It was like, he's an engineer, and of course it seems like he has a pretty solid understanding of the human anatomy and how to like do surgical procedures. But Saw 1 only had the most simplest of simple amputation aspects, or like, here's a bunch of barbed wire, you've got napalm all over your body, find these codes on this wall. There was nothing too intricate until we really get into Saw 2. So like, especially Saw 3 with is that Saw 3 where the guy has his eyes sewed shut? Because they literally shout that out.
Saw 4.
Yeah, that's 4. Yeah.
That makes sense, because I was always wondering who's this guy. It can't be Hoffman. It can't be, all of that. Don't want to go into too much because I know Will's over here confused past Saw 4.
No, I actually remember. I remember the eyes sewn shut from 4. Like, there's things that I remember visually from that movie. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and we're at the point too with the Saw franchise. Like we said, I think we all agree the first three were probably the best, and then after that, it was just kind of up and down in terms of quality. And I mean, with this one, I think that they're back up. I don't know what they're gonna do in terms of like the future with the franchise, because like you guys said, it's Tobin Bell's. He's getting up there.
He's 81.
And I don't know. He's 81 years old.
81.
I have
Holy crap, dude! What a
Yeah.
dude. He doesn't look it. Yeah, he's a trooper.
What a
He doesn't
guy.
look 81. Yeah.
I mean, you always wonder how much they have in them, like, and it differs per person. But you get to that age where physically you just can't do the schedule anymore. Shooting a movie, it's tough. I mean, unless you're Clint Eastwood, but he stands out. He's few and
immortal.
far between. But
Yeah, but for him, I mean, because I'd be interested in seeing the special features, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that was Tobin Bell with the waterboarding scene. I could be wrong. Maybe they had a stunt double for him, like taking all that blood. But like I'm like, man, that looks like Tobin Bell. So I mean, if that was him, that's super
I
impressive.
was gonna say, what a trooper if so.
Yeah, dude, for sure. But yeah, I don't know with his age and like also just like what we talked about the timeline. Like, what else can you really do? And I think that's something that they didn't really think about with Saw 3. I know they probably just saw it as a trilogy at the time and then, kill off John Kramer at the end. But, when the studio wants to bang out more money, it's like, we need to make more, but he's dead. So it's like, what do you do from here? I'd be curious to see with the box office numbers with this one. I know we were talking about it earlier, Chase. You said that so far as of today, right? It's at
29.3. So with an 18 million budget, or here I got it.
12 million
right
budget,
here.
I think.
13 million.
they're good though.
Budget.
They cleared it. They're making money.
They're making money, and
I'm
if
just
Exorcist
curious
doesn't
how
get in
it's
the way,
gonna do next weekend.
yeah.
Yeah. We talked about Exorcist already, but I'm curious how to see how that next weekend goes with the Exorcist premiering Thursday night.
Yeah.
I should say Friday.
And Taylor Swift's definitely
we'll
going to
see.
stop at that second weekend.
She's going to stop
yeah.
everything.
Dude.
Which is
sure.
bonkers to even think about. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like you guys said, they're still making money. I mean, that's one of the benefits of this franchise is like each of these movies, the production cost is so low. I mean, like most of them, I think are averaging out to like, 8 to 10 million. This one's like a little bit higher because of inflation, probably, 13 million. But that's easy to clear, especially even in kind of this atmosphere that we're in with a solidified franchise. So I don't know if they're going to see that and say, hey, let's knock another one out. But I don't know what you do story wise at that point. I really don't know where you go from here. I might even, I may feel different about it later. I might even say like, just leave it as is now and let the franchise kind of transition out. But I don't know what you guys think about that.
Too much money left on the table doing that.
Yeah. That's the thing. They're going to make more. I mean, if it's successful, they'll make more. And I will say the lower budget's probably the one thing that they have going for them, like moving forward, like if they choose to continue to make them. Whereas like I think we, not to talk about Exorcist, but I don't know what was the budget for Believer, because it was pretty high, right?
I think we said it was like in the 60 million range.
60 million.
For something Blumhouse has put out, that's high for them. So like that to me is much more risky than something like this. If I'm a studio head, or running a production company.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's much easier to greenlight a Saw film than it is something like Exorcist. And Universal, they paid ridiculous amounts of money.
Yeah.
Because they have to pay for the rights, right?
Yeah. So,
yeah. And Will, to piggyback
that's the whole
on
other thing is that might be completely separate from the budget. It's just the rights to produce, another film.
What were you saying, Chase?
I was just saying to like Will's point last week, whenever he brought up the Pope's Exorcist having like, I believe it was like $16 million budget and making like 53. And that's a healthy margin versus, facing, something much bigger. So, I mean, I would consider it a financial success, and especially word of mouth has been pretty decent. I've only heard a couple of people that really aren't, too excited with it. I think I saw one person say it was like they really didn't like it, but the critics' consensus is pretty solid. A lot of the fans are really liking it. Whether you have mixed feelings like I do. I mean, it's still Saw. Like I've never seen any Saw movie outside of the first three and been like, wow, a majority of that was great. Saw 5, the only thing I like in Saw 5 is the pen to the throat.
God, I hate Saw 5.
Yeah, like the pen to the
Genes
throat.
are there, that it's still a Saw movie. Like it didn't go so far outside of the realm of what people's expectations were where people got like really upset, right? So I think it's relatively safe in that regard.
Yeah, and ironically, like what you said, Chase, I mean, for what it's worth, because we know Rotten Tomatoes is kind of flimsy, but I think it's like the highest rated Saw entry in the franchise on Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes,
Yeah, dude,
critically
doesn't one
acclaimed
have like
wise,
a 50% or something like
which
that?
blows
It's
my
still
mind to me. I don't
crazy.
understand. That's
Yeah, I don't
mind-boggling
get
to
that at
me.
all.
But yeah, I mean, it got good critical reception. It's a healthy box office margins. I can totally see them making more. As a fan of the franchise, do I want them to make more? I'm torn. I love seeing Tobin Bell. I think he's what we were talking about earlier today. I think he's totally underused as an actor. I mean, he's pretty much just in the Saw movies at this point. He's a phenomenal actor. I don't know why they don't use him for other stuff, but I just don't know what else you can do with it as a fan of the franchise, like plot wise. If all you care about is kills, though, if all you just want to see is just torture devices and gory kills, I'm sure they'll just keep making them for that. But for someone who actually cares about the story, I'm kind of torn if they should continue or not.
Well, that's the issue with, most horror franchises, right? I mean, we can talk about Halloween in that regard too. It's just you get to a certain point, no matter what it is, where it's like, okay, where do you go? Like everything's already been done. So it's like, how do you reinvent the wheel? Especially after like 11 films. Like 11 films, I don't think people realize like 11 films over 2 decades. Like it's crazy to think it's been that long, but that's a lot. Like there's only so many directions you can go in. And again, the risk is, okay, well, we want to do something new, but how do we also make it not new? Because, if we go in a completely new direction, then we're going to lose a lot of people. So, the more films you make, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It gets harder and harder to be original, but at the same time, keep everything in there that attracts audiences in the first place, especially longtime fans. So,
well, I mean, they're definitely going to do Jigsaw in space. That's the next, pull the
God.
Jason X card.
Maybe they'll have a liquid nitrogen trap. That'll be fun.
But yeah, I mean, it's a solid movie on my end. I mean, it sounds like for you guys, I know you guys are like 50-50 on it, but it's not something. It doesn't sound like you guys like hated it either.
No,
I don't
solid
dislike it at all.
Mhm.
I'd still rank it very much. I'd still rank it much higher than a lot of other recent horror films that I've seen. Some of which we will not name. But yeah, I mean, overall, like as a Saw movie, like yeah, it's kind of like 50-50 for me, just because I had certain expectations. But yeah, overall, it's still much. I think it's much. Yeah, it was much more enjoyable than a lot of stuff I've seen recently. So
Cool. Yeah, so that's Saw X, guys. Hopefully I mean, when it comes out again, maybe we'll be able to chime in more in terms of like how we feel during a second viewing. Maybe we'll do like a live watch thing on the Discord or something like that, just to see how a second viewing impacts us. Which that moves us over to, I mean, like physical media wise. I think you guys have been more into kind of what's been going on this month than I have, because I've been so busy. I mean, what's been going on with you guys in terms of like physical media releases?
Well, Vinegar Syndrome, for our Vinegar Syndrome fans out there, I know there's a few people in our Discord that are heavily into that. They just dropped their October releases today, actually at noontime, a couple hours ago at this point. They got a few things I'm interested in. Mark of the Devil, which is a pretty cool exploitation film, like, satanic panic type movie from pretty sure the 70s that I saw a while back. I might pick that up. I was talking to Chase about Mother's Day, which is a
Yeah, I
cool,
saw you guys texting about it.
Yeah, Mother's Day. They're putting that out on 4K. I mean, I don't know if it really needs a 4K, but that's interesting. We talked about Vinegar Syndrome and whether or not they're gonna end the year with some bangers, and these aren't bad. I mean, nothing is like blowing me away, but I'm probably gonna pick up Mother's Day and Mark of the Devil. But I'm more excited for this week. There's a lot of big stuff coming out this week. Prey, Scream 3, to name a few. Those are both pre-ordered, so I should be getting those in the next couple days. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to watch Prey more than anything. I'm interested to see how that looks on disc.
Yeah, that one's gonna be. I think it comes out Tuesday, right?
Yeah, Tuesday. Yep.
Yeah. So Saw and Prey are probably my biggest ones right now. And then they released that we were talking about the Chucky Arrow set, which looks freaking phenomenal. Looks like it's like a UK exclusive though. And that's probably, I'd imagine that's probably Chase's number one pick for the month. Did you already pre-order it?
Yeah, I pre-ordered the yellow and blue set because I couldn't decide which one I wanted to get. And
damn, money bags here.
I was pretty excited for that. I mean, it's nothing real new. There's not a single special feature. I think there might be one extra special feature, which isn't really that exciting outside of I just want another collector's edition on the shelf for the most part. And I mean, I'm a diehard Chucky fan, really love the series. The Scream Factory releases were pretty underwhelming for its price point and the special features. I had a couple of cool audio commentaries on there. I just really like Chucky. And I understand, like, if people don't know or if this might be news to you, but that first Child's Play is Blu-ray. It is not 4K.
We were talking about that.
Yeah, so
there was a rights issue with that.
Yeah, so it seems like Arrow lately, that I believe is the second time, because Enter the Dragon was also on that Bruce Lee set, was a Blu-ray only. So it seems like it might be somewhat of a trend where you might have to play the disc swap game, which I kind of want to address. I'm not okay with that. I'm really not
Arrow
okay
has
with
alluded
that.
to that, though.
They've
kind of alluded to the fact that they're cool with that, obviously, seeing as, the circumstances are what they are. So.
Yeah, I just don't want to swap the disc art because I like the disc art on that. Like, I mean, I don't like get my disc for the disc art, but I really don't want to have just one stray disc in there because the uniformity of those discs, at least with the pictures that they've released, I'm a huge fan of them. Mm-hmm. I really like how that looks. I like the little art on it and stuff like that, and I don't want to put in the Scream Factory release. Because at that point, I'll just buy all the Scream Factory ones. And I get the box set's a good deal. If you were to go and buy all the Child's Play series individually, it would cost you the price of what I'm getting both of them for. They are $30 a pop for 7 movies. So, it's definitely not an easy pill to swallow. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for that. That's coming out in December. High Tension for those that, I've heard some mixed things about that. But some people are excited for that. Some people are like, why? So that'll be an exciting
the
one.
end is just, the end is just not, it kind of just, it just doesn't work.
Falls flat.
It's just the twist that the way they chose to go just pissed a lot of people off. I pre-ordered the standard edition. I didn't get the special edition just because it's like, I don't see it being worth like $47 or whatever it was. I think it was like 46 and change at Orbit, some of the other sites. But up until the ending, it's a really brutal movie. Like if you're into like the French extreme, films or French extremity, as they say, I would definitely check that out if you haven't seen it already. But yeah, the rest of the movie's great. It's a brutal movie up until the ending. The ending's just like, what the fuck? Like, why? And I don't want to spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, but it's just like really like very controversial at the time for that reason. So.
And who owns? I didn't, because I heard you guys talking about this before. I think a few days ago with the rights issue with Chucky. Like, who owns the rights to Child's Play?
Pretty sure it's. I got to look.
I think Chase, are you talking? I don't know if your microphone got muted.
I think my audio is very low for some reason. I think.
I mean, you sound fine on my end, but.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that it's Universal for the most part, and Warner Brothers, I believe, owns the first one because they're negating them getting the release over there. That's why they can't get the UK release on that Chucky set.
Yeah, you can actually see in the promotional photos the Warner Brothers logo is on the first disc. I believe it's Warner Brothers, and then Universal owns the rest.
Which that gets annoying when you try to do box sets and the rights are scattered among so many different people. I know like even like with like the Tarantino releases, I think those rights were kind of varied as well, and that's why it's taken so long to kind of get certain releases going even with that. So that is kind of annoying, and especially when you're trying to release a box set. I'm kind of conflicted on that a little bit. Like having just one that's a Blu-ray and the rest 4K. That's kind of, I don't know. That's a little odd to me. But people are going to buy it regardless. I mean, it's Chucky. People are going to, they're going to order it. They don't really care, and you could just swap the disc. But like what Chase said too, it's kind of like the disc art is kind of important as well. You're kind of losing some of that uniformity.
I hear people like complaining about the artwork too. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, Arrow does some of the best work that I've seen regarding their box sets. Like their box sets specifically are like second to none. Like they just do amazing work with the artwork. So I don't know where that's coming from.
I don't know what are they saying though? Is it that it just looks plain, or
it just looks plain, and then they're talking about the spine, like, oh, there's nothing on the spine, because I guess like the spine of the actual box where the Arrow logo is, they were expecting like something there, but it's supposed to imitate like the Good Guy Dolls box.
Yeah.
Like I get why they like I know what they're going for, but I don't know. I just feel like it's more nitpicking. Like I don't know if just the fact that like people have become spoiled with the amount of physical media that we've gotten the last 2 years, because the last 2 years have been crazy for releases.
Everything's been blowing up.
Yeah, and I just feel like people's standards are kind of, they're getting high to the point where it's like the second something is like slightly below their expectations, it's like they're just like talking shit, and it's like, dude, it's I just don't see where all that's coming from. Like, you're lucky that you're getting a complete box set, for the most part, other than 4K on the first disc. But other than that, it's as good as it's going to get for a while.
Yeah, I have noticed that too. Just kind of this trend of nitpicking, and I mean, to some extent, I know we all do it. If you're passionate about a release, and you see something that you're not happy with, I get that. But I mean, like what you said too, it's like you should just be happy that there's a set coming out. Period. And I have seen a trend of that where we're getting a little bit. It's so weird, like with the physical media now, where it's like, years ago, I don't think there were conversations about like the artwork and like, you know what I mean? Like the slipcover and like all this stuff. But like now it's become so niche that it's like, I mean, that's what we're also looking for. We want a solid transfer. We want a solid, soundtrack. But I mean, people care about the packaging too, to some extent, that it's understandable, but sometimes it's like ridiculous.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that too. The other thing is like, yeah, like you said, years ago, like I don't think there was this much. Like people are like hyper focusing on like more minute things now, because the market's become smaller, so to speak, overall. Like, yeah, people are buying more physical media, but I think that number of people is shrinking. Those people are just spending more money. Like they're just investing more. They're like collecting more. So with that, I think you see some of those attitudes reflected in, okay, well, I just paid so much money for this. Like, why am I going to buy this when I can just buy it here for better quality? Like, I'm going to get more extras or whatever it is, right? Like whatever their argument is. And we see that a lot. Like what Chase said. Like, I agree that the Scream Factory releases were definitely underwhelming. Like, one of my things with Scream Factory, I've said it before, and Chase and I have talked about this. The whole collector's edition thing, like, a lot of people are kind of on the fence about that, calling them collector's editions, but yet you have like bare bones or like barely any extras on the disc. Like, yeah, I can see that's like a valid reason to be upset, but like in a situation like this, like you're getting a lot. Arrow usually does a good job with extras. I think this set is killer. It's like very uniform. Like, again, other than the first disc not being 4K, I don't really see why people are so upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also just a whole other conversation and podcast in terms of like how nitpicky we've become. And I agree. I never thought of it that way too, that the community's smaller, but people are spending more money, just because it's just pretty much boiled down to the people that are going to buy physical media they're the ones that are buying it. But we have we just hit on the server. I don't know if you saw, Chase, like we just hit 32,000. But it's all, I don't know if those are just people that have found the community, and they were already buying physical media, or if that's a shift towards more people buying 4K Blu-rays. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a couple of different factors, because whenever you go in, you can see like analytics and insights on certain things. And the discoverability of it, especially so we can end up featured in certain aspects as recommended pages for people who, like, the Criterion Collection has 172,000 subscribers on there. So the thing is we're in the top 1,900 of all subreddits on daily posts. So that increases our discoverability. Oh, wow. So somebody might be like, oh, there's a community that actually buys these things, these expensive discs and stuff like that. So yeah, and then you go in there and you see a lot of Lawrence of Arabia posts, and you get hyped for Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah, I know a lot of people I don't even know if we should talk about that.
It's funny. I mean, it at one point was the hardest to get,
sure.
And it was a film that, like, you know, it won a lot of awards and stuff like that whenever it came out. Yeah, it stands the test of time. If you like epics, it's amongst some of the best for sure. And it really is up there as one of the best 4K transfers for sure. I'm not going to take away from that. But I feel like people are just buying that disc just to buy that disc. I really don't feel like a lot of people are buying that to actually watch it. Just because, like, before that, Columbia Classics Volume 1 became, you know, highly sought after. Lawrence of Arabia was not necessarily... I believe Gandhi was talked about more out of that entire set. Like, people were more stoked for Gandhi than Lawrence of Arabia. It became whenever it was like, oh, this is just as good, if not better, than 2001 in terms of transfer quality. And then I don't remember, because I remember being very patient. I wanted to try to get a hold of a disc, but I knew they would do a steelbook at one point. So then I got this steelbook. I believe it was summer of last year that it dropped out.
Yeah, you and I got it around the same time.
Yeah, it wasn't hard to order. I don't remember it being hard to get. It was very easy. I placed a pre-order, and then I remember people even in the community were able to just, okay, hey, I got one. And it went out quickly after, you know, pre-order shipped out and there wasn't a lot on the shelves. My Best Buy had a stack 20 deep on that shelf the day of release. And then now all of a sudden it's just become the most heralded item. And I appreciate the film. I get it. And it's a gorgeous steelbook. I just feel like people are buying it for the sake of buying it for sure.
$200 on eBay though, like stupid shit like that. Like, dude, it's one of those things where I just think it just got out of control. Like, it just snowballed. Like, oh yeah, this transfer is great, and like word spread about that. And then it's like, well, the steelbook sold out, and it just, I don't know, just caught on. Like, just a weird situation where now like it's selling for like the prices that it is. It's just crazy.
I think it was like what you said, Chase. There's so many different variables that like played into it. I think one is, I mean, the first one, I mean, it is a gorgeous transfer. Like, it's probably my top 5 transfers. I've seen it twice. It's a fucking gorgeous 4K. And the sound's great too. But I think to me, the driving factor that I've seen at least the past 2-3 years since COVID, like before we were able to just buy releases like whenever you wanted. Now it's become like this thing where it's like you pre-order it, and especially during the peak COVID, I remember when like Scream Steelbook came out and it sold out in like, you know, a day or two, and everyone was freaking out, how do I get this Scream Steelbook? And even I remember even with Clockwork Orange, there's this weird situation where I remember like it even just the regular standard release, like it was sold out, and people were like, what the fuck's going on? So we've gotten into this like weird like atmosphere where I think I 100% agree with you. People are getting it just to get it. I don't know how many people actually have watched it, but it's kind of like this like mentality where it's like, I'm gonna get this before it's like something I can't get anymore. And some of that was COVID, you know, production, you know, like I know went down for a lot of like 4K and Blu-ray releases, but also some of it's the studio's fault, the way they released it with that Columbia set, and then, you know, releasing it individually, and then, you know, not announcing when there's going to be a standard. I know there's people on the Discord that still don't even have it because they're waiting just for a standard release. They don't want the steelbook. They're like, just give me a standard release with the slipcover on it. So it's like a multitude of variables, but I think all of that kind of came together. And that's why we have the situation now where it's like, let me get it, even if you don't like Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah. And I'll poach this out there as well. Like, I still think, as like horrible as it is for the people that want to get it, I mean, you can still get it. It drops all the time. The stocks, like the stock channel on the Discord goes crazy all the time with it, and then also on the Reddit. But the thing is at least people are putting money towards physical media. That's the reason why I won't complain as loudly as I can about it, because they're still supporting physical media at the end of the day. You know, if it sells out and all copies are sold, God, if all copies are sold, then that's just going to increase more out of those other sets like Gandhi. Hopefully we get that one day. The other variations, I believe a majority, Taxi Driver hasn't gotten a standard release. Social Network hasn't gotten one. So hopefully some of those things out of Collection 2 do. Because, I mean, I only bought the Collection 3 set for Annie because I didn't know if it would get a standard release. I adore that movie. It's a cute little movie. The transfer looks great. And yeah, I only got it for that, but I didn't want to pay that much for it. But Sony knows what they're doing. It's kind of the same thing with their slipcover game, right? If you don't buy a Sony release within the first, usually sometimes even if you just don't pre-order it, you aren't going to get that slipcover if you're a slipcover hunter. They know how to target to their audiences, and they know how to make money off their physical releases. And it's not like the majority of their releases are trash. A majority of theirs are some of the best in the game from a major studio. They really don't miss.
They're probably one of the most consistent, I'd say, out of the major studios, for sure.
Yeah, they're really, really solid for sure. And I'm even a huge fan of Warner Brothers. Even the couple of times they've had some misses, I think they have a lot more hits than misses. Like Wizard of Oz,
Yeah,
I still think is top 3 transfer out there. It doesn't get talked about enough that Wizard of Oz is one of the best transfers out
The
there.
HDR on that is fucking gorgeous, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I personally don't agree with like Sony's release strategy with these like Columbia box sets since day one. It's just like I get it. I get why they're doing it, but it's just you're taking away from like tons of people who who are passionate about the films, who want to see it, and who at the end of the day they're gonna pay money. Like I don't know like what how much money they've made selling these sets. You know what I mean? And keeping it kind of exclusive versus just doing a standard release and letting everyone who wants to buy it. Like I mean, I just don't get it. It must be profitable doing these sets. Maybe they are making more money that way, but it just kind of takes away from this, like what we're used to. It's like a movie comes out, you buy it, and like I also don't want to buy a box set just for one movie. Like I forgot what movies were in the second Columbia box set. I wanted Taxi Driver because I'm a huge fan of that movie, but I don't want to buy a box set just for Taxi Driver.
I'm with you on that 100%. That's one of the reasons I don't own any of those box sets, and I will not buy them. Like, and again, I'm coming from a place where I only have so much shelf space, so I'm not going to buy a box set for 1 or 2 movies. I would rather just wait for the standard releases. And there's a lot of people in that boat. There's a lot of people that don't want to spend the money, or if it's a thing of just not having space, they're not going to go for that. So yeah, the fact that they're like holding out and just releasing a lot of these movies individually, like people are waiting for that. A lot of people are waiting for that.
Yeah. I will say out of volume 2, I did manage to snag Anatomy of a Murder out of that one for like $10 on Facebook Marketplace shortly after it released out of nowhere. And that's still one of like top 10 transfers out there. I loved that movie. It was a blind buy. I was just like, oh, cool, $10 for something out of a set. I don't have to pay 200, 150, however much it was out when it came out. But yeah, like it feels like a volumes game. But it's not like it's without its quality. I do want to make that clear with Sony. Like they are extremely solid with their transfers and do put a lot of care into them. But they know how to especially market that Dolby Vision game. They know what people want, and they will make sure that you pay for it. They will.
Yeah. It's just I think they should. I like the way the Alfred Hitchcock sets are dealt with, like where it's like you can get the set if you want it. If you want the individual releases, here they are too. And I think that's how Sony should approach these box sets too. It's like, if you want a box set, cool. There are people who are going to buy them, and that's totally fine. But it's like if there's only 1 or 2 movies I want in that box set, give me the opportunity to buy them individually. So yeah, it's going to be interesting seeing, and like what you said too, that the Lawrence of Arabia is dropping like on the regular now. I see like every few days, Amazon, Best Buy notifications, and like people were paying that $90, $150 eBay price, which is freaking mind-boggling to me. For a movie that it's going to come out again. I mean, there's no way it's just going to be, like what Disney does, putting shit in the fucking vault for God knows how long. But yeah, hopefully I think that now the Lawrence of Arabia stuff has died down a little bit.
No, for sure. And the craziest part is like even from first party, there's been varying prices every single time it pops back up, which I don't understand that part of it. Like from Amazon, not even third-party sellers, it's been popping up for $42.99, and as recently, I believe I saw it for $28.39.
That's the one I saw, yeah, for $28, and I was like, dude, I bought this thing for like $40 from Best Buy when that summer, the first release that it came out, it was like $40, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, so now it's like $28.
Yep. It's just going up and down.
It's weird. It's super weird, but yeah, I mean, I hopefully that dies down, and maybe I don't know. Hopefully, these studios communicate a little bit more effectively too in terms of what they're planning for releases, and not just having people wait indefinitely for Lawrence of Arabia standard release. It's like just let us know when you're doing it. But yeah. Is there anything else going on, like in terms of? I know we talked about it on the last episode, so we already kind of went into like physical media releases for October, and like with the only reason we did this episode was because Saw X was coming out. So it's because typically I think we're planning on doing bi-weekly or maybe bi-weekly or monthly releases. So I know there's not much like new news on physical media since we last did the last episode, but
I'm excited for Warriors.
For what?
The Warriors. I pre-ordered that.
Oh yeah.
As soon as I heard about it from
yeah. There are a lot of releases coming out, man. I mean, kind of like Will was saying before we had started, and I think Chase was saying too. It's like I don't have the money to pick everything up anymore. You know what I mean? When these releases were like, pre-inflation, maybe like 20-25 bucks. Now some of these steelbooks are hitting like $40. I think Prey was $40 if I recall correctly.
It was about 40.
So when you have like, if there's 3 releases coming out, back in the day, maybe that was like, I don't know, like $70. Now it's like you're planning maybe for 120 if you're collecting steelbooks. It's getting expensive buying all of these movies.
Yeah, and I think Prey just went down to $29.99 on there. It's on Blu-ray.com right now for $29.99 for the steelbook. So if you're listening and you haven't gotten that or pre-ordered it, I recommend that.
Really?
Yeah, or at least it was whenever I pulled it up. I haven't refreshed my screen, but when I pulled it up,
mine through Best Buy. So like, and I know I'm kind of conflicted if I should go through Amazon now, because at least Amazon, I know they do their whole like you get the lowest price like that they listed for the pre-order. But I think Best Buy just charged me a good 40 for mine.
I thought it was that not a Best Buy exclusive, Prey?
No, I don't think so. It's not a Best Buy exclusive. Amazon had it. I don't know if there's another retailer that had it as well. A lot of the Best Buy steelbooks, they aren't actually they package it that way. It says Best Buy exclusive, but you can actually get them through a lot of different retailers.
Yeah.
That was something that was interesting when I first started getting into steelbooks. Was like, I always thought it was like just through Best Buy. But like the Joker steelbook, the one with Joaquin Phoenix, that one was at Target. I got it for like $10. It was sitting on a shelf. Yeah, and I remember at the time people were selling it for like $60, $70 because it was like a Best Buy exclusive. It's some weird thing that happens. I don't know how it works. But yeah, I mean, we will probably maybe. I don't know if we're gonna do an episode next week or in the next 2 weeks. Maybe. I mean, talking about Prey would be kind of cool when we talk
Exorcist
about
comes out. Believer.
Oh yeah, so we might have another podcast in a week.
Yeah,
because Exorcist is coming out, and I'm curious now because Chase said that his expectations are a little.
Yep. And I might get to see it Tuesday, but I might pass on that screening. It's a special screening I got invited to by this fan club, and it's just a standard screening, but I think that's a movie I want to experience in Dolby 100%, because I think it'll intensify, how I'm going to walk away from it in that setting with the 7.1. So I think I'm going to still wait for Thursday night, but I might have some early thoughts on Tuesday and maybe give it a second go and just maybe even have 2 takes, but... Other than that,
coming out in IMAX as well. From the trailer I saw, it said IMAX at the end, which I don't think it was. They'd used any kind of IMAX, digital cameras, but yeah, IMAX or Dolby would be the way to go for sure.
Yeah,
cool.
And I think that wraps that up.
Yeah, I think we passed our Jigsaw test, right? I think we clamored and gave Saw all the praise it deserves. I think we all appreciate it in terms of a film franchise, whether we love the individual releases or not. I think overall, when you look at the franchise as a whole, people do enjoy it, and everyone has their films that they love or hate within the franchise. But it's definitely a franchise that's here to stay, and we're excited to see what they do. Whether this is the end or if they keep going, I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Yeah, I agree. As a super fan of the series, for sure, it's. I mean, even if they do, I'm still going to go see it. They've got me on that hook regardless. I'm going to go see anything and everything. The rumor that I've seen going around even before Saw X went around was Jigsaw 2 or Spiral 2. I hope that's not the case. Do something different like this if you do. Please, if you're listening, Jigsaw, you put a game out here for us, so please do a Saw 11 if you're going to do anything.
Yeah, please. I don't want another Jigsaw. I don't. I mean, is that the official rumor that's going around?
That's what was going around before Saw X. Is that those were going into pre-production. It was never officially announced, but those were the strongest of the strongest rumors before we actually got Saw X. So I hope that's not the case, and they do. I mean, let's say even if it's just an Amanda solo, I think that would be cool. Yeah,
that'd be kind of cool.
Take away John. Just let her go have her own thing. If you want to. Hoffman's young, bring him back and do something else like this, There's
did you guys see I don't think we talked about that. They did a mid-credit scene. I don't know if you guys saw the mid-credit scene.
Saw that.
Yeah.
which is kind of, I mean, everyone's doing it now because of Marvel, but
Mm.
I thought that was a fun little scene. I mean, it wasn't like mind blowing, but I thought it was cool seeing Detective Hoffman again.
Yeah.
I agree.
Nice
Cool.
little treat.
Yeah. All right,
Alrighty.
guys. Well, we will probably catch you maybe next week for the Exorcist Believer podcast, where we're gonna delve deep into Exorcist Believer. Hopefully, it, like what we said, we just want a solid experience with it. We're not expecting anything mind blowing. We just want to come out and say that was a fun movie. But we'll see. We'll be seeing you guys next week. We appreciate all you guys' support. We've been looking at the views and monitoring the views and the feedback that you guys have been giving us, kind of like what Will said. We appreciate it. We just kind of wanted to do this just to do it. We weren't expecting anything major with it. We just like talking movies, talking physical media. So the fact that you guys are listening and supporting it, we humbly appreciate it. We can't say that enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Like utmost thank you for all the overwhelming support. We really just did this as a passion project, right? Had zero expectations, and great things come to those people that are patient. And so we greatly appreciate you, those that tuned in for episode 2 as well, and continue to support. We feel the love, and we greatly appreciate it. So we're here to provide the content that you seem to like so far, right? So thank you guys for supporting us in every future endeavor. It's been a wonderful ride.
My door just propped open. I think we passed our test, so I can walk out of here, at least on my end.
I'm stuck here.
I'll just say this, some people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not us. Not anymore.
No, not us. Not anymore.
We're rehabilitated. We got this.
Yeah, exactly. New perspective on life. All right, guys. We'll catch you next week. Appreciate you guys.
Take it easy, everyone.
Thanks, guys.